Welcome to Pandamix Healing Conversations in Between Times. I am Reverend Lang.
And this is Dr. Hong. Welcome. Before we start, I would like us to start with a breath and settle into our bodies. And let's begin.
In talking about the political dimension of healing the political face of our being, the central question over and over again is, how do we together midwife, give birth to, bring forth the fundamentally new and better? And that transformation is not a destination, is not an ideology, is not a utopia, is not an ideology that says this is what it needs to look like. More than anything else, we want to present the idea of what it is not, where we can get arrested, stuck, and snared, going around and around and around in circles. Right?
So in the last episode, we gave some examples. We talked through the emanation, the dramas of emanation when it comes to political dimension. We talked about the incoherence and the potential deformation.
Yes.
Okay. So in this episode, we're going to deepen that conversation with some more stories, some more examples. So where do we begin?
So helpful again to see how emanation, which is natural, it's so much part of our lives. Emanation is, for example, again, something you believe unquestioningly that gives you a sense of inspiration, security, and pulls you in. Right? It's like the power of a god.
Or kind of safety of a child.
Indeed. Not wrong in terms of this is how we need it, but we can see how it operates. So to bring up something in the political sphere in which this happens is to look at what is now being presented in the West as a China-US conflict. You read the Chinese press, they're not presenting it as a China-US conflict. They report it as a China-US conflict because that's how the West has now conceptualized it. As soon as there's conflict, there's I'm on the right side, you're on the wrong side, and I'm serving the right God, the right emanational God.
Right beliefs, right dogma,
Right God, right ideology, right religion. And for the US, it means we are democracy, and we are right, and the Chinese are communist.
And capitalism is the best.
And capitalism is the best, communism is evil, and all the reasons are now being lined up for why China is not just a rival. It's okay to have rival, it's the enemy, and how not only just an enemy, it's really almost satanic without needing to say that. And by the way, to think of the Chinese as satanic and the devil goes back 200-300 years of the Yellow Peril, right? Now, of course, it's politically incorrect to say those things. But the same religious impulse is there, and it's emanational. Now, we want to bring this up to see not just what harm you might be doing to the Chinese people, what the West is doing to itself by thinking in these terms of I'm being right. There's a way to think about supremacy that goes like this. Right? It happens to European, to Americans, to white people. It also happens to males. It happens on any side in which you think you are right. And it goes something like this, right? When I do good or do something great, I'm exceptional. When I do something bad, that's an exception. When you, my enemy, when you do something good, it's chance. It was by fluke, you got it. When you do something bad, it's your character. And in this logic, I'm always on the right side because I'm exceptional and my bad it was just an exception. And your good is by chance. You know, you got lucky.
Why do you bring up supremacy? in this conversation?
Because when that happens, supremacy is affecting you, and it stops you from really learning and from engaging with reality as it is. What's happening between the US and China is the supremacist logic. It cannot believe that China, that calls itself a communist country, is able to lift 800 million people, more than double the population of the United States, out of poverty. Right? It's not able to think that after the Great Recession in 2008, when the United States took all the bailout money and essentially bailed out the banks, what China also did was it also printed money, had a fiscal stimulus, and what it did was to build high-speed train lines. It had like 30 miles of high-speed train lines in 2008. In 12 years, is built the world's largest high-speed train lines that's going all over China, which is the same size as the United States. And what does that do? This lifts really poor people to be able to travel, to work, to sell their goods. We are unable to see that because we have labeled them communists. And actually the Chinese they're only communists by name. They call themselves communism with Chinese characteristics. By thinking of ourselves, Western people, in a particular way as being really better, that's what supremacy is, the mind is shut down to actually think that someone else you have characterized as your enemy, as different, as inferior, as wrong, as evil, as violating this right or that right, that they cannot also at the same time do good and carry out the good. It's called communism. Right? Is that?
Mm-hmm.
So,
let's take a breath. I'm just taking it all in. It's a lot. Keep going.
So this is how far it goes when we are in the service of our own emanational identity about ourselves, which has afflicted the West for a long time. We are Christians, there's something learned from other religion. Okay, now by and large the West is not Christian. Then it says it's capitalist, it's democratic, it has no reason to learn from others. You start having ideological capture. You're captured by your own beliefs. So, for example, we know that unfettered capitalism, especially in the United States, really, really needs to be changed because the top 3 richest persons in the United States, Gates, Bezos, and Buffett, own as much wealth as the bottom 50% of Americans. Working Americans, there's 100 million. Whenever there's a critique, you're going to be called a socialist, tarred, as bad as those Chinese and Cubans and Venezuelans, okay? So, can't have a conversation, cannot talk about what's happening. So then I often will say to someone, okay, let's leave outside people who don't look white, because we know you have a barrier. Let's bring up Norway, as white and fair-skinned as it comes. And they don't have shareholder capitalism, they have stakeholder capitalism. So they have North Sea oil, it made a lot of money, and the government put that money together in their sovereign fund, into a Norwegian global pension fund based on oil, $1 trillion of it. And that is used to fund a welfare state for education, for health care, for unemployment benefits, right?
Yeah.
And that we also have a hard time to see. So I just want to talk about the inability to learn when we are captured.
Right. Captured and conditioned.
And identified with an idea.
Being programmed. Because, the word welfare really means welfare, meaning well-being and being well.
Yes.
But it has turned into such a dirty word, like a welfare state.
Welfare queen. Ronald Reagan coined that.
Yeah, I'm a recipient of a welfare state. my father and I came to the United States as refugee from a war. And my father was a doctor in Vietnam, but when he came here, he couldn't get work because he has to go back to school. And I remember getting in line.
He worked as a janitor?
Yeah, I remember getting in line to receive food stamps and cashing food stamps. And the embarrassment that I had, like, why is my father, a doctor, has to do this? But I now realize that without the welfare check, my father wouldn't be able to go back to school and get his education. And I wouldn't have the opportunity to become a doctor myself. And the investment that the government put into my father, the few $1,000s that they gave to him for the first few years, he paid probably 1,000 times more taxes, maybe even 10,000 times more taxes since then, right? And so welfare, we have to reframe that word. Welfare means well-being for all citizens.
Our full needs.
But in the United States everybody for their own. The winners take all, and the losers, you
deserve it.
You deserve it, and
right. You deserve it. So here now is the drama of deformation coming in, and we think, how did this drama take place? Because again, we are for each other. We can all win in the casino. Hey, why not? Let's go for it. That's incoherence, and we went for it, and now deformation is taking place because in going for this casino society. We have then opted at the same time.
I don't quite understand when you use this casino, but give me an example of the deformation that you see in the United States right now. I mean, we mentioned a few.
Yeah, the destructive death. The opioid crisis is destructive death.
The COVID deaths that make the United States the top 10 of deaths.
Yes, but to look at the dynamics behind it, how do we get there? We cared only for ourselves. When pain started taking place...
We care only for the individuals, not for the collective.
I care for me, you care for you, we don't care about the collective. Right. And then it mounts. You think of the dynamics that led to the opioid crisis, had pharmaceuticals involved, who just basically said, hey, we're here to make profits, and that's nothing wrong, and we are going to create this opioid. But somewhere along the way, it was quite clear that people understood the science was not there, this was addictive, this was harmful. And what happened? In incoherence, these executives, all, I'm sure, well-educated, individually moral, compartmentalized themselves, right? And so pushed out these drugs that created this incredible addiction. And the addiction went on top of the unemployment. I mean, 4 years ago when I did a retreat for a church in New Hampshire, I was invited to go home with people to have dinner. And at dinner, these are middle-class, white European Americans. There was just always at dinner for the 3 nights a story of a suicide among someone young and of an overdose with opioid. This is visibly seeing the signs of deformation. And why are we repeating these stories? I think actually now it's very important, in order to get a deformation, to actually tell the story, because part of it is to wake up, to see the dramas of death and death dealing that is taking place, so that we might at least be shocked enough to say, oh, no.
Please take a breath with us, feeling your feet on the ground. Allow ourselves to settle back into the body. I feel just the tension in my body as I'm listening to this, partly because I'm asking myself, well, why are we talking about this? Why is this important now? And then what can we do? What are the needs now? Coming back to this framework of asking ourselves, what are the needs? What is the deprivation that we're experiencing individually and collectively? What is it that we can do and we're capable of? And I also assume that many of us, out of despair or out of incoherence, sometimes I feel like, well, nothing I could do. But I have to remind myself, well, what is my capability? What can I do? Not by myself, but what can I do with you? What can I do with you? What can we do together? And then what is it that we are willing and ready to do? How do we come to our senses? And what kind of attitude will we approach this? If we come from a place of, what's the point in a way? So it's a kind of apathy, or
That's a defense. Yeah.
I only do it for my people, my group, then also that's a kind of defense out of pride. So I'm just sitting with the why. What's the purpose of these conversations?
I don't at the moment want to say it except to just play with the word, let's face into this question, why? I love that we have these faces and dimensions of our being, because it says, before I do anything, the doing I need is to face in. I must face into the deformation. I must face into the deformation in my life. The addiction that is destroying my body. The lack of care that's destroying my body. My refusal to be humble enough to say, I need you. Let me call up a family member or friend and to connect, because that's what I need. To face up to how I resist. To face into the deformational politics around us. To face into our history. And yes, it is difficult work, but facing in. And to invite you to show me your face and my face. It's not another program to run out and say what to do. I mean, if there's a run out to what to do that folks are wanting, I say very simple. Then look at where it is working elsewhere. Look at other European Americans who have looked at their whiteness and are saying, wow, this is how I work through having slavery in my background. Look at other countries that are having such mixed model. Cyrus Jansen has a wonderful video cast on China. He's an American. Look, envision. Look at socialist European countries that organize themselves differently. Look at American communities that organize themselves differently. The transformational stories are there. If as individuals and as societies we allow ourselves to do that. We're not short of it. If democracy as an identity is so important, whether you're more right or more left, really open it up. Look at the ways in which China is democratic at the local level, at the village level. There are elections taking place. Just not at the national level. Okay, let's be more American. Let's look at where democracy came from. It was not just from Athens and from Rome. It also came from the Iroquois Confederacy, a confederacy of 6 Native American tribes in the northern part of New York, near the Great Lakes. That includes the Mohawk, or the Oneida nations, and the Seneca. I can't remember the others. They were warring, feuding, and then achieved by the name of the great peacemaker, had the idea of assembling them together with the help of actually a woman. And they came together. The Iroquois, I want to respect their names. They are called the Haudenosaunee people, the Longhouse people, because they built a longhouse where they all came together and sat in council. And apparently it was the women who elected the chief that would be in charge of them. Wow, to just be in touch with that story all over again. And they had peace. Part of it was they banded together to repel enemies on the outside, but within each other, they left each other with autonomy. Presumably, this is where the separation of powers in the US, we drew upon that. We know for a fact Benjamin Franklin invited them to talk to the colonialist leaders. To listen to those stories again, and to listen to the humility, to listen to the self-emptying, as Manfred would say. We have to empty ourselves of these emanational gods and come to neutral again. And that's also part of your Buddhist practice, how we just let go of these attachments and really deeply listen to the new that is arising.
Please take a breath with me. Another breath. Feel your body connected to the ground. A few things that's resonating with me a lot is when you were talking about face in, facing ourselves, face the mirror at a personal level, facing each other, facing into the vulnerability of what it's like to be human and have bodies, facing into perhaps the pain of history, the trauma of history that we still carry in our bodies from different groups, to face in, to lean in, to feel into, for the sake of learning.
Yes.
How do we continue to learn? Because the moment I'm stuck in an incoherence and I'm refusing to listen, to see, to feel, to open up, then there's a choice point. I go to deformation. If I wake up and I say, I'm going to face you, I'm going to lean in and listen to you,
Yes.
and let's see, I want to know what your needs are. I want to know what your needs are. I want to know what you're capable of. And I will ask you, what are you ready and willing? And I will share the same.
Yes.
And then we're going to find, how do we work together? Now, this, I know this is very easy to do, but we do this all the time in relationships, in relationship with ourselves. So for the sake of learning, for the sake of healing, the sake of evolving as a species, because we're also at a crossroad when it comes to climate change, when it comes to our understanding of what is truth. We live in a time where we don't even know, we don't even trust the news anymore. And we have people who just make up whatever they feel like making up. And so then, how do we come to know ourselves and know our vulnerability of being together?
I think one of the greatest contribution to facing into the truth is also what we are saying, not made up conspiracy theories of whatever stripes. It is there in history, and you know, America's great contribution to healing is the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous, And the first rule of that is to face into reality and to look at your pain and what is no longer working and to hit bottom. By the way, to hit bottom is not when you hit like a physical bottom, right? Mm-hmm. To hit bottom is when you stop digging the hole you are in. To stop digging the hole you are in and to really look and to face up. And part of that facing up is to what is not working. The Haudenosaunee people, which is to say the Iroquois Confederacy, had 200 plus years of peace. We have to take that in. We have to take that in and realize that America comes up short because the US has fought wars every year since its founding. One war a year from 1790 to the 1900s, 6.6 wars a year from 1990 to the present. Wow. Wow. Let's face into the fact that other people know how to work with peace. I want to have one more piece of historical detail because we're talking about the political.
We're coming to a close.
We're coming to close.
You have 30 seconds to say what you need to say.
Yeah. For example, we always say in the West, religious wars so bad in the world. Let's stop them. Actually, the West is talking about itself. Is the West, both Europe and the US, that has continual wars, dreadful wars. In the same time period that Europe in the 1600s had what was called 30 years war, religious wars where 8 million died. In China, Japan, Vietnam, and Korea, they had 300 years where they had no religious wars. No religious wars. Other kind of wars, but real stability. Why? Because Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism was very inclusive. They did not use it to go after each other. We really have to let go of these ideas that don't help and look for where other people, other human beings, right,
So please take another breath.
have transformed.
Yes. Well, as I'm listening to you, I'm also reflecting we're talking about national, cultural, political, very big systems. I bring it back to the personal again. How do we learn to look at ourselves in the mirror, like really look, and be able to admit to ourselves? I look into the mirror and I say, I can admit to myself where I fail, why I make mistakes, where my pride took over, how do I repair? And I'm just thinking of people, friends, who I have a hard time being with now. What would it take for me to reconnect? What would it take for me to be humble enough to say, wow, I would like to hear from you, your perspective, what you're capable of, what your needs are. And is there a way for us to work together? Because we cannot move through this period separate. So that's at a personal level, and then also I think at a historical level, face into the history. Stop being apolitical. I mean, being ahistorical. Understand your own family system, your own ancestors, where they come from, the traumas that they carry, passing on to each of us, how to heal that, how to learn from those experiences. And then also, from my meditative Vipassana tradition, one of the most important practice is to face into our own pain. Face into our own pain. This comes back to the very early episodes we said, where's the hurt? And then cultivate the ability to be with hurt, with pain, and be able to tell these stories. And this is what we're doing. We're just inviting ourselves into these experiences. So, please take one more breath. We are very grateful to have this opportunity to be in conversations with you. We're looking forward to deepening our dialogue with you. Looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
See you next time. Thank you.